Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar sponsored by ITSPA and MASITE. Thank you for joining us. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available for future viewing. All participants have been muted, but if you have a question, please type it into the Q&A function. Before we get started with the presentation, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny McCracken, President of ITSPA, for some brief comments. Jenny?
Thanks, Kevin, and welcome everybody to our panel discussion today. Just a few announcements before we get started, and I hand it over to Lou. I really look forward to seeing many of you next Wednesday, May 11th, for the 2021 MASITE versus ITSPA golf outing or golf challenge. We have a historic attendance where we have 96 golfers, so just a reminder that registration starts at 7:15 and a shotgun start at 8 a.m. And just be sure to read through regarding the COVID policy before you get out there. Also, if you have or know of any students who are currently studying civil or transportation engineering, just want to point out that we still have our ITSPA 2021 scholarship, which deadlines for the scholarship this year are May 21st. So if you haven't seen that, that's also posted on our website. And lastly, last Friday, we did send out a news blast on the 30th for a member survey for the membership regarding our annual meeting, which we're planning a virtual annual meeting this year, and just also to ask about some social events that we're looking to schedule this year. It's only 7 questions, only takes a few minutes, and I'll actually just post the link here for everybody if you didn't see that. And also, if you haven't seen, PennDOT has a 2021 AV survey. It's a great thing to send out to your family and friends. They're looking to gauge, perception of AV technologies throughout the Commonwealth. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Lou and thank Lou and Kevin and our entire events committee. They've been working really hard this year to bring you good content. I know we all have a lot of things that dictate our time, so we do really appreciate all of you being here today. Lou, I'll hand it over to you.
Who's joining us today. A special thanks to the panelists and the ITSPA and MASITE members, Kevin Hunt, Chad Martin, Dave Wolf, Jenny McCracken, and Steve McGinley for helping to put this technical session together. Today's session should be an insightful view from a contractor's perspective. On the panel, we have Pete Huber. Pete received his BS in electrical engineering from Wilkes University and started his career at SimCorp Incorporated as a systems engineer on naval projects. He went on to Chappie Corp as a CQC electrical engineer on federal government projects, and Ryan Company as a superintendent and CQC manager on federal government projects as well. Pete has spent his last 21 years with Carr & Duff Incorporated as a project manager for power distribution and ITS projects. Mike Matsko is an ITS systems specialist with Kaharchik Construction. He received his degree in electronics technology at the Air Force in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, then served in the Department of the Army as a civilian avionics technician, completing 10 years of service. Mike later went on to work for SSI as a field service tech of Arwa Systems in Mid-Atlantic states, completing FCC licensure and FAA weather certifications. Mike began self-employment in 2001 as an automated surface weather observation stations technician. Mike completed several factory training sessions with companies such as Daktronics, SES, Highway Information Systems, Sierra Wireless, Bosch, Cohu, and American Signal. Mike began fieldwork opportunities as an ITS systems tech for larger electrical contractors, as well as PennDOT through DGS contracts. In 2009, Mike joined Kaharchik Construction Incorporated to lead the company's ITS technical service team. Jason Trevitt started his career at PennDOT District 10, working in the summers while going to college. He began working in the construction union and worked there until taking a position in the ITS signals group within the traffic unit. Later, Jason took a position in District 11 as the TMC manager. Throughout his career at PennDOT, he grew the TMC to become the regional TMC for Districts 1, 10, 11, and 12, and increased the operational capacity to 24/7. In 2012, Jason left the department to join Gibson Thomas and assisted with development of the 1200 section of the Pub 408 and sat on committees which received the technical standards for ITS deployments. In January of 2014, Jason joined the Road Division of Bronder Technical Services. Since then, has managed many construction projects and assisted the other divisions within the company with fiber communications related installations. He also serves as the primary integrator for the company. Greg Robash is a 34-year employee of Wellington Power Corp with 41 years of industry experience. Greg has extensive past project experience in all segments of electrical construction industry, including surface transportation, light rail, Class 1 rail, intermodal facilities, power generation, power transmission, natural gas, coal, iron, and steel, petrochemical, cogeneration, heavy marine, Class 1 aviation, wastewater, research facilities, SCADA, fiber optic networks, and electrical maintenance. And with that, I think today's session should be a very insightful view from a contractor's perspective. So with that, I'll start with the questions, and I'm going to pick each one panelist, and then the other panelists can add additional comments as needed. So Pete, I'm going to start with you. And the question is, how has COVID pandemic affected the cost of bidding a project? And if you could give us some examples of material costs or material shipment timeframes.
Thank you, Lou. Yeah, unfortunately, we've all experienced this COVID pandemic over the last year or so, year plus. As far as our impact in our industry, the cost for bidding has gone slightly up because of the COVID pandemic. We've experienced some things in the field, such as fogging of safety glasses due to wearing the mask. We've had some employees have had headaches and nausea from wearing the mask all day. We've had to keep the social distancing per the requirements. The major impacts for that is not having employees ride in the same vehicle. So obviously we have more vehicles on the project, which adds to the cost, as well as creates a little bit of a logistics issue as far as having so many vehicles out on the highway. We've added hand wash stations, which obviously costs some money. We've had some instances where some of our crew members tested positive, so then we had to go and test the rest of the crew. So that's obviously an impact. As far as material shipments, we've experienced a wide range of delays. We've had some manufacturers from, say, California, where obviously the restrictions are different, state by state, municipality by municipality regarding the pandemic. So some of those delays have really been a wide range. Some factories, obviously they buy materials from other factories that are in other states, parts of the country, which delay their delivery to us of whatever that material was. So it's really been a wide range. We feel like everything, obviously with the vaccinations, we feel like all of these issues are starting to subside, but hopefully it tends to trend that way. But in the beginning, we experienced a lot of these issues heavily. So we'll see how it goes going forward.
Hey Pete, how about individual material costs like steel and conduit and shoring wood? You know, wood, I know prices of wood have gone up.
Yeah, we're seeing all-time highs on copper, steel, and PVC conduit. Um, they're the three main. Wood is also one, Lou, but we don't buy a lot of wood, but wood is also escalated quite a bit. Copper is, we have senior people here that have been in the industry for 40 years, and copper is the highest it's ever been. And from what we can tell, it's going to go even higher. Right now, it's about $4.70 a pound, and they're predicting $5.50 a pound, and they don't see it reducing by the end of the year. So, and typically, when it starts to reduce, it goes a lot slower than the rate that it increased. So, a lot of those have impacted jobs that we currently have. Obviously, if we didn't buy, say, the copper or the steel conduit or PVC, because we didn't need it at that time, we're taking a hit based on what we carried in our bid. Going forward in our bids, we're adding a lot to cover these escalations. Some contracts, like PennDOT, they do have a steel escalation clause, but most contracts don't deal with copper, you know, fluctuating prices in PVC. So we're hedging. We try to hedge it, and like I said, we're taking a hit here and there, and then going forward on some bids, we're carrying additional to hopefully cover those escalating costs.
Thanks, Pete. Does any of the other panelists want to weigh in on that question?
I think Pete covered it fairly well.
Do you have any idea of, have the prices doubled? I mean, percentage wise, you mentioned PVC. Has the price of PVC by percent gone up? Can you give us any input on that? I mean,
I know copper is not quite doubled, but probably 40% higher.
has that reflected in your cabling costs?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yep. PVC, I don't know the exact numbers on that, Lou, but we could find that out and send it to people if they're interested.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can weigh in on that. We experienced that like 2-inch PVC was almost double of what it used to be, but it only was partly, I guess, affected by COVID. The other part was factories that create the resin for the PVC down in Louisiana. They got hit with two hurricanes last year, one right after another. So the factories were under water, and it took a while. They're slowly starting to come back down, but I don't know if we'll see the same prices that we had before.
Mm-hmm. So you're pretty sure that those prices will continue throughout this year, those increased prices?
I would think so. Like, I mean, just for an example, 2-inch PVC, we were getting like 47 cents a foot before, and it's somewhere around 86 cents a foot now.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll move on to the next question. Mike, I'm gonna pick on you this time. And I guess this is, other than COVID, what other aspects of a project have affected your costs?
Thank you, Lou. One of the things I'd like to shed light on that may not be familiar to anybody is the sales and use tax in Pennsylvania. Koharchik's got a firsthand view of this by way of the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue coming on and levying penalty on them for paying tax on every traffic signal pole that they've installed since 2011. Um, it seems originally everything that was underground was taxable, and they made some changes in the Department of Revenue. Only the traffic signal, as far as signals go, and on ITS projects, the sign itself, if you're putting a sign up, the structures, the signal poles, they're classifying those as conduits now, so they are taxable. And anybody that's not allowing for that, beware. Um, they levied that penalty against us. We took it up with an appellate court and won, and now we've been shot down by, we have to go to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania to fight this, but our CEO has explained a little bit to me today that we're talking several $100,000 worth of taxes imposed on goods that were once before considered to be, non-taxable. And I see this in the ITS maintenance a lot too. Everything ITS maintenance wise, it's a replacement part, is levied a 6% sales tax, which takes a big bite out of a maintenance contract that might have $1 million or more in material costs over a 3-year period. So that might be something that we get PennDOT to take a hard look at, maybe getting a tax exempt status for some of these projects. But it ends up costing the end user a lot more, whether it be a municipality that's getting a traffic signal or whether it be a state project. So
Mike, there was a follow-up. Sorry, there was a follow-up question. What's the percent tax on those items?
6%. Yep. So just like you getting on Amazon and buying something out of state, the state wants you to pay tax on that purchase you made. They want the contractors to pay sales tax on anything that they consider is not part of the landscape, of the natural landscape of a project. And that now includes any of the steel on the projects. So it caught us by surprise, and just might want to take that into consideration. Now, every time we bid, we do take that into consideration. So,
Thanks, Mike.
sure.
Anyone else on the panel want to add to that? A question? Okay. We'll move on to another question. And this one I'm going to ask Jason. In your opinion, if you could modify the PennDOT PTC standard specifications or design, which would it be and why? And what would be the alternative?
If I had to pick one, I would say it would be the structure mounted conduit that's in Pub 647. The way they have it in the 647, it's almost like a utility where it's underneath. My experience with that is that it is greatly increasing the cost because of the hanger system that's required. I think that the alternative would be to put it on the backside of a parapet. We've been doing it that way for years and years. And I'm not sure why it wasn't ever included as an alternative in the standard, but yeah, there's opportunity there for the department to save money in placing the conduit on the backside of the parapet as opposed to underneath. And we're currently working with a couple different districts in doing that as a kind of almost like a value engineering, but more just like a cost savings to both us and the department.
Does anyone else want to, any of the other panelists have any other additional comments to that question? All right, then I'm going to pick on Greg this time. This question is, what construction procedures, equipment, or techniques have increased productivity of your projects, and if possible, give some examples.
I think, I would say the installation of fiber optic cables and fiber optic networks. We've seen basically a, change here, particularly on the Turnpike's latest design for microfiber. And that appears to be, something that I would say is a huge cost savings as opposed to putting full size jump conduits in and bridge crossings. Though it does represent challenges of construction through the shoulder from what we experienced on our latest bid that obviously we weren't successful on for the statewide PTC. But, we think that, the future, I know there's been a lot of microfiber deployed out here in Western Pennsylvania, but that appears to be the way that the industry's going. And it appears to be, a huge savings dependent upon what the application is. Through the shoulder, maybe not so much of a savings because of the restoration cost. But all in all, it's a lot easier to deploy than standard jacketed fibers in full-size raceways. So the equipment out there is getting much better relative to doing blown-in fiber applications. The industry seems to be coming around and developing the installation tools that make blow-in fiber, much easier than it had been when that technology first came to the market.
Clear. I don't believe everybody was on. If you have any additional questions, please put them in the Q&A. And Kevin Hunt is going to bring them up after each one of these questions. Kevin, do we have any so far?
We do have one, but Pete, did you want to add something on one of the previous comment or questions?
Yeah, appreciate it, Kevin. On the standards question that Jason was talking about, we have some items that we would like to see changed. Not necessarily with the 1200, but the overall projects. And we've talked to District 6 about this first one quite a bit, and I know they're working on it. But the utility bill issue, at least in the Philadelphia area, is a huge delay in the ITS projects. As you know, right now they want to meter all the devices, and obtaining the meter, especially in Philadelphia, for whatever reason, just takes a very long time. We've had several projects delayed due to that fact. So we've been talking to District 6. They seem to be amenable to it as well, and I believe they're talking to Harrisburg. We feel like they shouldn't be metered by this time. Everybody knows the usage rate of all the devices, and the utilities can just charge it just like in similar fashion they do the traffic signals. So then we wouldn't need to do any service and meter applications. We wouldn't have to obtain the meters, and there would be no need for the PDA item in the bid. So that's one item that we'd like to see go that way, just for the fact that it'll take the potential delay out of these projects. Some of the other items we have, I guess the UPS, we feel like from a maintenance standpoint, and maybe Kaharchik can talk about it, that's a bit of a burden. I feel like the UPS shouldn't be required or in the standard unless it's absolutely critical. So it should just become a special provision in a certain contract rather than having it throughout the standard. Some of the other things we had, we talked about this before the talk started here at 3 o'clock, but the maintainer pads, we kind of agree that we really think they should kind of go away. I don't really see the use for them. If it's on a drastic slope, then I would say you should have them with the railing. But other than that, we don't see the need for them. It's just an added cost to the project. Another item we had was on the directional bore casing. A lot of times it's still steel, but we prefer HDPE casing. The Turnpike pretty much uses that, but PennDOT, we always have to ask for that to get it changed in a particular contract. Another item we have is the patch cables. For some reason, they continue to be a bid item, and you know, some jobs there's hundreds of patch cables, and our experience is the inspector doesn't go around and count them all, or we don't keep track of them. So in our view, they should just be incidental, and we brought that up on several occasions. Just from a counting perspective, they should just be incidental and remove that bid item. That's really, they're mostly PennDOT items. In the Turnpike, we would like to see on the MPT if the portable message signs could be alleviated. That's obviously an added cost, and it is a very logistically challenged requirement, considering the exit ramps are 20 miles away on average. So you have to kind of drive, you know, 40 plus miles to pick them back up. So there are some of the things that we thought of on the standards for both departments, if they could take a look at that.
Thanks, Pete.
Hey, Lou, if I could piggyback on what Pete was saying about the directional boring stuff, in addition to going to HDPE, I think that the department needs to develop the standard size of what they're going to use. Too often we see it that there's some 5-inch, some 6-inch, you know, and if all we're running through it is a micro conduit, I mean, they could save a lot of money by going to a 3-inch if it's just micro conduit. Now, if you're running power and micro conduit, then maybe you go to a 6-inch. But if they would standardize on that kind of stuff, I think it would help everybody.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah,
Go
we'd
ahead.
like to add a recent application for the Turnpike, very difficult boring application. That do you really need a sleeve? I mean, if you're going to put HDP in the ground for a power conduit, you know, these sleeves, there's no way to pull any raceways out of these sleeves and pull new raceways into them. You know, it just doesn't happen. It's not possible to do due to the geometry sometime of the bores, or, you know, whether it's contamination infiltrating the sleeve. You know, so we wonder really, if you're going to put HDPE pipe in there when you're pulling back your bore, whether you really need an overall sleeve. Why not just put the raceway sizes in that you need on the pullback and not bother with an oversized sleeve? Just adds to the cost. It doesn't really add anything, you know, to the board. It's not like you're going to reuse these sleeves in the future anyway. Very few times have we tried to pull back on a sleeve that already had product in, where we were successful in getting anything out of it.
Thanks, Greg.
Lou, I'd like to address something Pete brought up about UPSs, if I could.
Yes.
I have to disagree. I think the UPS is valuable if it's maintained properly. Due to the conditions of where the cameras and equipment are installed, the UPS provides additional AC hour regulation and provides a more stable output to the load. Absence of a UPS subjects your equipment to all sort of fluctuations in power, where the UPS maintains, you know, a constant voltage. And again, the key thing being, if it's maintained, you'll see a lot of cameras under maintenance that after 2 or 3 years, the batteries fail and the department chooses to just pull the batteries out, discard them, and then do away with the UPS. I think that takes the quality of our final product down quite a bit. And most especially in the hub cabinets, maintaining a good UPS system in the hub cabinets is very valuable. Although in recent meetings with the District 6 ITS, PICO is getting ready to introduce a pilot program where they're going to provide a UPS supplied right in the lines circuit coming in. It'll be interesting to see how that, and I believe PennDOT's going to try to take part in a pilot program down there. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I do think if maintained properly, a UPS is invaluable to ITS equipment.
So this is getting some good feedback here. So would a power conditioner be useful add where UPS battery backup may not be needed?
Absolutely would be a suitable alternative for only instances of obviously, conditioning the power supply. But yeah, one thing I would like to see a UPS be able to do, and I believe we're going to be trying some of this in District 8. We're going to be trying to put UPSs in that talk to ATMS, the software that will let the traffic center know when the power goes out to a device, because that's been one of the big problems. All it was doing on battery backup is delaying the inevitable and when you find out the power's out. This will actually send a email notification that the power has failed at the site. So we're going to see how that works out.
And then Pete, we had another follow-up. Don't you think the maintainer pads do serve some useful purpose in keeping high weed grass growth clear of the cabinet door so technicians can work in a clear area? Also, if small parts are dropped, it's easier to find them on the pad rather than the ground.
Yeah, that's one thing that I did think of, Kevin, that it does keep the grass or whatever weeds growing. I don't disagree with that. I just feel like there's not a lot of situations out there where I don't know. There's a lot of hairy areas, I guess you could say, and putting a maintainer pad in some of these areas just you have if it's on a down slope, you just have the pad just gets washed out underneath continuously. I don't know. We've been out to a lot, just like Craig and Jason and Mike and those guys. Seen all kinds of stuff, and it just seems more sense, even from like a grass cutting operation. The grass cutters don't have to go around the pad; they just go right through. So I think who's ever commenting on the high weeds, it's where it's not maintained by a grass cutter. So I do agree with that. So maybe in those instances, you just include the pad in those situations.
Kevin, any other Q&A questions?
Yep, we did have one more come in. Sorry, it just jumped off on me. I noticed some ITS design plans showing a NEMA 4X box attached to parapet on both ends of bridge for use with 4-inch communication conduit. Do you feel this is necessary or not needed? That's open to anyone.
I mean, I'll jump in, I guess. I'll say no, as long as you have a JB2 on either side of the bridge, or if you're running power and communications, obviously you'd want a JB2 and a JB1. But that's a whole separate issue, I guess, with JBs. I think that we can, eliminate boxes and save cost. I'm not sure. Typically we just put a 45 in and take the conduit off the bridge down into the dirt and hit a JB.
Yeah, I agree with Jason on that.
Kevin, any other chat questions?
Yep, they just keep coming in now. On the JB topic, are the sizes of the JBs too large or too small?
I would say, for the most part, I would say they're the right size. If you have a splice enclosure for closure for the fiber, typically they are put at an angle inside the box to make it fit, but it does fit.
I have a follow-up question to Jason about these maintainer pads. From a designer's aspect, is more about the location of them and where the cabinet's located. If you want to.
Yeah, this kind of from our earlier discussion, but in the standards it has that the maintainer pad's basically supposed to be 180 degrees away from the roadway, but depending on how far you can get the camera or pole or whatever it is back from the face of guide rail, I think that on a steep slope it actually makes more sense to put the cabinet facing traffic. There's a certain liability with that. Obviously, the cabinet could get hit without the pole being struck, but from a maintenance standpoint, it's easier to work on a cabinet if you're higher up from the pole itself. You don't have to put the cabinet so low that you can look at it at eye level, and and then if the pole has a lowering device, you're obviously already dealing with the increased size handhole on the bottom. So just something to think about. I know we have a standard, but that should be maybe for completely level installations, and we should be looking at other instances on a case by case basis to make sure that what we're doing, it makes the most sense.
Jason, if it is a pole mounted cabinet, would in a case where you do have a slope, maybe more beneficial, I would think, to put it on a ground mount in lieu. I mean, of course, there's a little more conduit that you're going to have to put in, but it takes it away from that maintainer pad situation on a slope.
Yeah, it ultimately depends on, and it goes back to the conversations that we've been having here before about whether UPS is needed, what type of communications is being utilized. I mean, but in some of these remote camera sites that we're seeing, I mean, the only thing that we have in the cabinet is basically a cell modem. You're coming Ethernet straight from the camera down to the cabinet, and you got a little power supply and a cell modem, and that's it. So, I mean, the size of the cabinet doesn't really even have to be that great. But, like I said, it all depends on what all you're putting in there.
Thanks, Jason. Kevin, are there any? Are the Q&A still coming in?
We are. So what is the preferred method of the new microduct installation? I think this goes back to what Craig might have referred to earlier.
You got to unmute him, Kevin.
I got it.
Whether it's through dirt. Is
Greg,
oh, through the shoulder.
we didn't catch all of that, Craig. Could you repeat that?
Whether it's through dirt.
Kevin? Any other?
I definitely like to chime in on this, because this
Okay.
goes to one of the other questions that I guess you had sent us earlier, with regards to like common issues that we run into, or, in the design versus the build. Like the preferred method, I guess, that everybody would like to see for this microduct installation is by, vibratory plow. That's how a lot of, smaller HDPEs get placed in throughout the Midwest and things like that. They use it in the oil and gas industry when it's applicable. But one of the things that we constantly run into when we get that plowed trench item is that there's not a lot of area in Pennsylvania where you can plow a trench. It's too rocky. You can bring the biggest vibratory plow that you got, and as soon as you start hitting blue rock, you're going to be at a standstill, and you have to go back to either hoe ramming or with a very big rock trencher to try to deal with that. So, it's just something to consider, for everybody out there, I guess. That, obviously, if you got good soil and a flat ground and everything, it's perfect conditions, sure, a plowed trench makes a lot of sense. But like I said, in most places in Pennsylvania, you're not going to have those types of conditions to be able to utilize that. You have to typically use a conventional trenching method.
Okay, final follow-up for right now. Can you elaborate on cabinet access issues, particularly for ITS devices located along the interstate where pull-offs are limited?
I give my input on that, Lou, from a maintenance perspective. On the having to do a lane closure to inspect a sign is a major inconvenience. So obviously, when we run into things like that, we like to say, wish they would only have considered this when they designed it, that they have adequate shoulder for, accessibility from a bucket, or a pull off where you can get safely behind the guide rail to work on it. It's very important. And a lot of times, some devices will get pushed out to only getting inspected once a year just because of the inaccessibility, and it takes away from the spirit of a good maintenance program to not be able to access things properly. So I think it definitely should be taken into consideration.
I'll concur with that 100%. There's other design implications. Something that we had talked about earlier was just even the location of these cameras at bridges. They're putting the camera behind the mound of dirt or rock that they're putting in for the safety purposes of the bridge, with little or no access to get at the device or the cabinet. So, I mean, just certain design considerations, like Mike was saying, it will definitely help with maintenance of all the infrastructure out there moving forward.
Thanks, Jason. We can probably move on to another question. Craig just emailed me and said he was having problems with his voice communication feature. Are you still with us, Craig, or can you hear us? Nah, probably not. All right, well, I'm gonna come back to you, Jason, and because we kind of touched on this question, and this was also one of the registrants' questions. What is the biggest issue or most common you as a contractor run into in the field converting what the designer has on the plans to what you actually need to install in the field?
Yeah, you know, whether it's the trenching or like the other big one that I had already brought up was the how the conduit gets installed on the bridges. Those are probably two of the biggest things that I face. I mean, you know, is determining, you know, what the intent was, and you know, we can typically tell what that is, but you know, what's probably the most cost effective way to put in what they're asking for. Some of the other issues that we run into have more to do with the technology end of it, whether it's IP addressing of the devices, or how the network is fitting together. That I think that the department has made big strides in that arena with giving us direct access to some of their people at central office IT. But there's still maybe a little bit of a difference in the way we see things, and our expectations as far as what we're supposed to have for that type of information, and when it should be received versus what we get.
I know you kind of touched on this a little bit about, from a maintenance standpoint, access to the site, but also access to the site during construction can be a problem as well, and may even affect the cost of the project. Is that, anybody else want to chime in on that question at all?
Yeah, Lou, we have one situation. In order to get to the cabinet, we have to do a left lane closure, and because of the highway that we're on, there's no shoulder on the left lane in the left side. Because of the highway we're on, we have to do that at night. So obviously, working at night to access, just to get to the cabinet, it costs more. The rates, obviously you're on premium time because they're not going to work the whole week just for one cabinet. So that's where we see an impact. But that's only one situation. But going back to what Jason and Mike were talking about, in the design phase, if they could have looked at putting that cabinet, say, on the right-hand side of the road, where there is a shoulder, then we could access that during the day with a mobile operation MPT closure on the shoulder.
Mm-hmm. So magnitude of MPT requirements is also, can be, or how often you can have lane closures can be an effect on the cost of the project as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Boy, I wish we could talk to Craig here, because my next question was for him, but I'm going to have to.
Craig, can you try right now?
You hear me?
Yes.
There you go.
I hear you now.
Okay.
Excellent. So, Craig, what are some of the delays to a project that you've experienced other than weather?
As delays are concerned, it mainly has to do with traffic and time restrictions, holiday restrictions, event restrictions, particularly here in the Pittsburgh region. So that's been the biggest impact on jobs that we've had. We seem to work in heavily urbanized areas, probably a lot like Pete and obviously Jason does. Obviously we work through the Mid-Atlantic in Maryland and DC on under the Tidewater of Virginia. Luke. Luke?
We can hear you, Craig.
Yeah.
Yeah, that appears to be the major delay that we have in building out these deployments is more restrictions.
I'd like to add to that, Lou, and saying one of the big issues we have are utility companies. Delays, whether it be waiting on a new service of some type or possible a relocation on a larger project. Utility companies play a heavy role in when we're able to do our work.
I agree with you, Mike. I know PP&L has been pretty good as far as getting work orders put together. If they're done during the design phase, it does speed things along a little bit faster.
The last item is the submission process. If there would be a way to speed that up, that would help all the contractors and the departments as well. But sometimes our submittals from our pole suppliers can take 6 months themselves, and then you have the approval process on top of that, and not to mention we have an average 77-day receivable timeline right now. So the whole process is kind of slow, start to finish.
Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
I'm going to go back to Jason here. This question actually came from Vasala, and it was, what are the qualifications experience level we should be expected in a good technician?
That is a good question. I really think that it all depends on what you're dealing with. You could have a good technician that knows a certain type of device inside and out, but doesn't know another type of device. So somebody who's very familiar with CCTV cameras, and they could be excellent with CCTV cameras and setting them up and having them work, absolutely perfect. But you take that same technician who's not maybe experienced with DMS communications, and he'd be lost. From a maintenance perspective, we need guys that are a jack of all trades. They need to have at least a little bit of experience in everything that we deal with. So anything from the device level to the communications level and back to the TMC and the devices in the TMC. From a construction perspective, it's more based on the project that you're dealing with, in my mind, that you have an expectation that the guy that you send out there will be well versed in the task that he is doing. So I know not 100% answering the question, but I guess my experience has been that, there's been certain cases where if we're, really struggling, troubleshooting an issue, you have to call a manufacturer's representative and get their troubleshooting online and whatever to figure things out. Whereas, other projects, we breeze right through it. So I'd say it's highly dependent on the project.
Mike, do you want to share with us your experience that you've been trained in so many different?
Yeah, and Jason's absolutely correct, because there's so many different facets that you have to be familiar with. And I got my start working for a company. I got thrown into, much like Vicella, I was working for SSI. They had a guy who knew the system inside and out, much like Jason and I do now, all these systems. But the guy that worked for SSI, he guided the technicians over the telephone through a lot of their troubleshooting tasks. And I think that made a lot of good technicians. Whenever you're able to be independent in the field with a little bit of guidance over the phone, it really works well to bring someone up to speed. And more and more on your own, less leaning on the phone call is what'll help that tech to develop.
Peter, Greg, do you have any follow-up to that?
Yeah, I agree with Mike on that. You know, as our technicians go through, they start to gain knowledge, talking to the rep or what have you, as they go through, and over time they build up that knowledge and are well versed in the devices. So as far as a qualification, I don't really see like a certificate that they would need. It's just a matter of experiencing the troubleshooting issues for a particular device and learning how to get through that.
Thanks, Pete. Kevin, do we have any additional chat?
Yep. So we've got a couple additional follow-ups / new questions. So start with this one. This goes back to Mike, and might be tough to answer, but I'm gonna put it out there. How do we bid the sales tax into engineers' estimates?
I guess you would look at any steel structure. I mean, maybe we need to get the state to clarify their law. And that's the big problem right now. The tax law is so unclear. That's how we got in the position we're in with that. So once clarification is finally made, whether or not all mast arms, all DMS structures, all camera poles are going to be taxable, then everybody across the board can know that at bid time. But if only the guy who's been pinched by the State Department of Treasury is going to take that 6% caution on his next bid, then he's at a harsh disadvantage to those other contractors who haven't been pinched yet. But rest assured, my CEO has named all the contractors that he bids against, I'm sure. So.
Okay. Another one on the mounting of the conduit to the outside of the parapet. Understand that that's less expensive, but they often see broken conduit or conduit no longer attached to the bridge when driving. Would placing the conduit beneath make it last longer? Factoring in repairs over the lifetime, do the costs become similar?
I understand where he's coming from, but I would say no. The cost of the maintenance for conduits underneath the bridge are much higher, because in some areas we actually need a snooper truck. Mike, you probably remember the anti-icing bridge on I-80. I mean, you're 300 feet above the creek, and you get a rodent in that conduit, and he chews up the wires, and you're dealing with that. There's no doubt in my mind that having the conduit on the outside of the parapet is cheaper all around, maintenance and installation. Now, maybe there should be a better program for identifying anchoring systems that are failing or whatever like that, kind of like what they do with the rest of their bridge inspection. But I think that is still a much cheaper alternative to putting it underneath.
Okay. Another follow-up. Pete, did you want to add something? Sorry, thing just popped up. From a maintenance standpoint, What are your thoughts on placing control cabinets further from the devices to a place that's more accessible, safe? Apart from servicing the actual device, would this help or be more of a burden?
I think it would be, make the system less effective. I think anytime you can shorten the distance between the device and the controller cabinet makes the system better. So I don't think putting it further away in any way would help.
I think if it's in a better area, I think that's a plus. You know, if it's even 100 feet away, if it's a flat area, safer area, I see that as a plus. Most of the time, you're in the cabinet troubleshooting. It's only if it's a failed part at the actual device where you have to access the device.
Why not put the whole device back there?
Well, a lot of times in design, they need a device in a certain location based on logistics. You know, I'm not going to speak for all the engineers, but because of you know, site distance or a curve in the road or what have you.
And I know a lot of the DMSs originally, when they were manufactured, they always had a DMS sign and they had a cabinet 80 to 100 feet in front of it. And we ran into a lot of situations with rodent intrusion, chewing that fiber link, or some of them had a copper link, which created additional issues with lightning and thunderstorm problems. And a lot of the manufacturers went to putting a controller cabinet right on the same structure and recommending it as such. And so we just always participated in that theory, but to make it a standard rule to move the cabinet further away from the device, I think would be a bad as a general rule. Certain circumstance may warrant it, but as a rule, I would not.
Yeah, I think with the question, they were more geared towards safety and long-term maintenance. So I would tend to, if you could put it in a better area, I would be for that. Just for specific locations, not as a standard though.
Kevin, is that all the Q&A questions, or?
We have one more. Can you explain the value of a traceability matrix for an ITS project?
No, they're not. There's no longer a reg working. That's correct.
We might not have any takers on that one.
I mean, it depends on how the project was designed. I mean, if the project utilized the systems engineering process through the entire design, then through that design process, there should be functionality identified that's required by the client in which a traceability matrix would show that all of the functionality for whatever purpose or whatever device you're putting in, it's met all that. So, I mean, it just depends on, I guess, the complexity of the design to determine what whether there is any value in a traceability matrix versus maybe just like, you know, your standard test procedures that the devices have.
Jason, I have a follow-up question. That you mentioned mice, how they get into conduits. And over the years, there's been all different types of ways to seal the conduit. I mean, can you suggest a better way to do that? Other than, I mean, I know steel wool has been brought into it, and then there's other materials. But I've been on projects where somehow they get into conduits.
I mean, I think given even the best effort, you're always going to have to deal with rodents. I mean, they get into houses. Your houses are sealed up. I mean, they're going to get into the conduits. Our common practice is to use a very, it's a very high, or I should say low, um, trying to think of the word. It's very coarse. It's a very, very coarse and stainless steel wool. It's very sharp to the touch. You have to use, like a cut resistant glove. And typically what we do is we mold that in with duct seal and stuff the ends of the conduit with that. Um, you know, that stainless steel mesh does help a little bit, but I don't know that you're ever going to 100%, get rid of the mice or snakes or everything else that we deal with when we open a JB or a cabinet.
Okay, are there any other Q&A, Kevin?
We had another couple come in.
Okay.
What is one good item or change that has come out of COVID related to this industry and how business is handled now?
Craig, you have any?
This experience.
You guys, you're out there working all the time. It's kind of hasn't really affected you that much. I'm assuming as far as the construction, other than the restrictions during construction.
This is what Bob said, to be shut down.
Say that again, Craig.
We've had multiple jobs that had to be shut down. We have one right now that's shut down because of an outbreak. There hasn't been anything positive. Maybe closer examination of our safety plans, but all in all, it's been a pretty negative experience, not only for the contractors, but the men in the field also.
I'll say one good thing, that, when everybody was at home and nobody was actually physically going to work, there was no traffic on the roadways. And there were several projects where they had 901s that restricted us to nighttime operations, where they allowed us to go out there during the day because there was just no traffic. So if there was one good thing that happened, and maybe even moving forward, I mean, look at how many of us are working from home now. If there's less traffic on the roadways, maybe one can hope that, the restrictions will be lessened on us.
Well, then we wouldn't need ITS, Jason. No, I agree with Jason. We had some projects that actually had waivers. We worked right through the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and so I was out the whole time, and there's like zero traffic. And the last month or two, the traffic is back in the Philadelphia area, and the regular traffic jams are back. So
Yeah. Any other Q&A questions,
Yeah.
Kevin?
Yep, we got a bit of a long one here. On projects, how direct is it to work through fiber splice structures with more complex projects where you may be running multiple loops or have legs for future fiber loops? Is this easy to clarify in the field? And then how easy is this when splicing into existing systems to extend a system? And how do you handle light maintenance / loss?
You may have to repeat the question.
All right. So let's take this one part. Is it easy to clarify in the field when a complex project has multiple loops or legs for future fiber loops?
That depends on how good the documentation is for the project.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. And then how do you handle light maintenance loss for some of these complex systems?
I mean, it depends on how the system is set up. You know, in certain situations, you can break into splice enclosure and not affect all the splices in that enclosure. You know, concentrating on the ones that you need to break out. You know, having hub locations with splice enclosures for all of the distributions or trunk lines that are running through it is key. Especially you need a splice enclosure anywhere where you feel like you're going to be breaking off and going a different direction or whatever. That's the best way to minimize loss in the communications trunks.
And I allowed the one that was black to go through, so I'm just gotten 3 emails, and then this last one that I just approved.
It sounds like somebody's shouldn't be on mute. Not sure who
Yeah.
that is.
I think we're good now. All right, one last one, Lou. What has been the most difficult aspect when trying to implement smart work zones on projects?
In here.
Anybody?
What was the question again? Sorry.
What has been the most difficult aspect when trying to implement smart work zones on projects?
I'll have to get back out of the moment.
I can answer a little bit of that. I think with my turnpike experience, when we did a lot of smart work zones, the biggest problem was being able to move the devices between the phases of construction and then having them recalibrated for each phase of construction. And keeping them out of the way of construction, because most of the times they're inside the work area. The devices that are, whether they're traffic flow detectors, cameras, or portable DMS, that's always been an issue because it's usually a third party that's doing it. And of course, that's on large projects. Most of the smart work zones are added to fairly large projects. I don't know if that helps at all. I have, are there any more Q&A, Kevin?
We just had another one come in. Do you think a centralized ITS committee made up of those who are familiar with the current ITS technologies would help to oversee ITS project design so that issues can be caught early and addressed?
Craig?
You know,
And nothing in there regular.
Lou, can you hear me?
Yes, yes we
Okay.
can.
You know, from Wellington's perspective, you know, our outlook is more large scale. We would rather look to work with a designer and work on best value design build jobs. That's really been our specialty across the Mid-Atlantic, is working on design build in conjunction with one of the design engineers to come up with the best methods of construction. That's where that's our sweet spot in the market, and that's how we'd like to participate more in the industry than the smaller scale $1 to $2 million jobs that are, common out there, add-ons to systems. We look more to build new systems or replace systems. So we favor the design build aspect and working with a engineering partner to deliver these jobs.
Craig, while I got you, that was one of the later questions I had was, what is your opinion of the different contract procurement methods? Design build, design bid, build, ITS included in a roadway or bridge project, and elaborate on the pros and cons of each.
Well, I think from our perspective, again, we're going to go back to best value design build, and having the ability to work with an engineer and come up with the best solution from not only a cost perspective, but a quality perspective for the end user. Pennsylvania's gotten more away from that. They developed these ITS standards, and I'm probably going to make enemies here in the design consultant industry, but we'd rather have a design consultant on our team as opposed than having them on the other side of the table. Some other states have gone that way. We've participated in some P3 jobs and design build jobs outside of Pennsylvania, but Pennsylvania is more stuck in the consultant mode. That might change here with the P3 laws if that all changes. So I think, again, we're looking towards more large scale, non-ECMS, bids against, 4 or 5 different contractors. And, that's our sweet spot.
And just to follow up with that, typically your design builds, for you guys, in Pennsylvania, it's low bid. So the consultants, for the most part, are going to get shopped unless they go exclusive. So, you're talking about best value.
We're talking about team building, and that's just not something that happens here in the Commonwealth. And maybe, the state is getting great value from having these highly competitive bids, but, I don't know. I don't know what the quality of the work is out there. And again, we like to have a hand in the design because, methodology, we might be able to bring to the specific application. We might be able to bring value with the methodology of construction, where Pennsylvania is extremely rigid in what they want delivered.
Thanks, Craig. Does anybody else want to share or offer additional comments along those lines? Jason or Mike?
It looks like Mike might have to jump off for an emergency.
Oh, and Pete said he had to leave at 4:30 as well. I know we're getting close to the end here. I think we've had a fairly good discussion. And just before we take off here, are there any other Q&A questions, Kevin?
So there is one. I'm going to put it out there. Somebody asked if they want to know who your favorite consultant is and which PennDOT district do you like working for the most? If nobody wants to answer that, that was the last question, though.
They don't want to shoot themselves in the foot on that one. I do have some other questions that came from the registrants. One was, what knowledge base should an ITS inspector have? And I guess that kind of goes along with the technician knowledge that they need to have, but I know they couldn't all be like me, Pete, right?
I think not just the inspector, Lou. I think across the board, whether it's the RE or the ACE, and as far as not just ITS, but electrical in general. We go ITS job to ITS job, explaining to everybody on, from the inspector on up, what this is, what that is, how this works, where this is, so we can get paid for it, because they don't know what it is or where it is or what it does. And I physically have taken inspectors or an RE out to the site near the end of the job, because we weren't paid on, say, an Ethernet switch or a media converter or a patch cable, and open up the cabinets and show them. During the installation, we explained to them all that stuff's in here and it won't work without it. But yet they don't know what it is. So they don't feel like we did it, so it's not going to get paid for it unless we go show it to them. But even when we show it to them, they still don't know what it is. I'd be pointing to a power supply and saying it's a media converter, but they wouldn't know the difference. So I think from job to job, like electrically across the board, whether even a power service, fiber communications, what we experience here is there's no knowledge from the inspector on up. Generally, there are specific projects where the ACE has a good handle on what ITS is, if you will. But, it'd be less frustrating if the inspector corps knew exactly what they were looking at and understood electrical and ITS. That's from our view.
I know a lot of projects have construction consultation built into them, even though there's the base inspection staff that handles a lot of the civil type inspection. On top of that, I mean, are you even saying that when there's a project with construction consultation, usually a consultant will have that task on a project, who is usually generally a lot more experienced with the systems?
Yeah, our experience, Lou, the inspecting corps, sometimes it's an actual, say PennDOT employee, but most of the time it's a consultant. But they're more civil based. They have no background whatsoever in electrical or ITS, from our experience.
Hmm.
And every job we seem to have to kind of reteach, the staff to a point.
Thanks, Pete.
Yep.
Jason or Craig, did you want to weigh in on that question? No?
Based backgrounds. And they just, they don't understand the technology.
Lou, I'll tell you this, I floated this a long time ago, but honestly, my opinion, there should be a regional ACE. They regionalize the ITS groups and stuff like that. There should be a regional ACE that deals with electrical. That's his forte. Electrical, ITS, highway lighting, all that stuff. They have a consultant in central office that reviews all the lighting submittals and stuff. They should be looking to do something like that, from a managerial perspective. I think that the issues that we see would pretty much go away, because like Pete said, even when we think we're trying to help the department or whatever by doing things or changing things in a certain way, just getting that point across is often difficult.
Thanks, Jason. Kevin, any additional Q&A?
Nope, just some compliments. Great job. Those sort of things. But other than that, we are good.
Well, I want to thank everybody again. Thank the panelists. And again, thank everyone who was involved in putting this session together. I don't know if Jenny's still on. Did Jenny want to say anything more. I think it was a very good session, and it was a good information sharing and a good perspective from the contractors.
I agree. I think this was a great way to end a Friday afternoon and a rainy weekend. And I appreciate all the hard work you did, Lou, and thank you to our entire panel. You guys were great. I think we had a lot of great questions come in. Kevin, you did such a great job just keeping track of all of it. So we really do appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing hopefully many of you next Tuesday.
We are definitely getting requests for another round of this. So great
Good.
job, guys.
Great. And thanks, Kevin, for all your help as well.
You're welcome.
I think
So,
that's, go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to say, if we are going to be trying to put together future webinars, if you guys have any ideas, you reach out to any one of our event coordinators, either for ITSPA or MASITE. You can get their contact information from our websites. Other than that, thank you and have a great weekend. So anything final?
Thanks again, guys. Thanks to the panelists. I really appreciate all of you willing to attend and share the information that you have. Thanks again.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you.